Well, you've got the resting potential down. Now we'll finally look at the action potential. So get ready for this long-awaited journey into neurobiological chaos. It is also affectionately known as the AP. Signals are transmitted through nerve cells by the AP, more precisely by electrical excitation. These excitations are caused by a change in the membrane potential. The membrane potential is the voltage across the nerve cell membrane, in case you forgot. For this to happen, a resting potential must first be present in the nerve cell. This means there is a potential difference between the inside of the cell and its environment, which is around -80 to -70 MV. It is negative inside the cell and positive outside. The action potential originates at the axon hillock. All electrical signals come together here. Specifically, the nerve cell receives through its dendrites the signals transmitted from other nerve cells. Back to the axon membrane. At the resting potential, there are more potassium ions in the cell and more sodium outside. There are two important ion channels in the cell membrane, one for potassium and one for sodium, and also the sodium-potassium pump. Now, when signals from other nerve cells arrive, the membrane potential changes. It becomes positive, i.e., less negative. Either the signal is converted into an action potential or nothing happens. So the axon hillock decides what happens to the excitation, whether it will be passed on or simply ignored. To trigger an action potential, the depolarization must reach a particular value. It has to reach the threshold of -40 MV. One could say it needs a sufficiently strong stimulus. In the membrane, there is a potential-dependent sodium channel. When a signal arrives, this channel reacts to the change in potential. It opens at around -60 MV. -40 MV is the threshold which must be exceeded for something to happen at the membrane. If this is the case, we have a chain reaction, with more and more channels opening. In this graphic, you can see a couple of stimuli that were too weak. Only the upper stimulus is strong enough and leads to an action potential. We call this the all-or-nothing principle, either everything or nothing at all. We can't have a small action potential or half an action potential. Due to the chemical gradients, or the chemical potential, the sodium ions are sucked into the cell because they want to be evenly distributed on both sides. I think you already know that from the video on resting potential. The electrical potential also drives the positive sodium ions into the negatively charged cell interior. Since large amounts of sodium now flow into the cell interior, the membrane potential changes. It even goes far into the positive, up to around +40 or +50 MV. This phenomenon is called overshoot. This overshoot is also called the peak value. But then, after 1 to 3 milliseconds, the channels are closed off by blocking particles. Once the resting potential is re-established, this inactivation is reversed. The time that the channels are inactive is called the refractory period. During this time, no new AP can occur. Around 1 to 2 milliseconds after depolarization, more channels open. These are the voltage-dependent potassium channels. After the overshoot, potassium ions flow out of the cell due to the electrical and chemical gradients. Potassium only leaves the cell after the sodium channels have been inactivated. You can easily see this delay here. As a result, the membrane potential goes back to its original state, the resting potential. That is repolarization. Then we even get hyperpolarization. That means the potential becomes even more negative than the resting potential. But after that, it settles again to something between -80 and -70 MV. The sodium-potassium pump is working all the time, bringing potassium into the cell and pushing sodium out. The action potential stays the same. The key phrase here is the all-or-nothing principle. The AP is then transmitted across the axon, but we'll go over that in the next video. Because that ended up being way too much somehow, here's a very short summary. A large enough stimulus arrives. Depolarization due to the Na+ channels opening quickly. Overshoot and inactivation of the sodium channels, delayed opening of the K+ channels. Repolarization. Hyperpolarization, undershoot, and finally back to the resting potential. If you want to know what happens next, just binge watch on to the next video.